Hey guys, it's Shortcakey. How you doing today? Hope you're doing good. Today, I've decided to do 20 of the scariest urban legends. Urban legends are rarely, strictly, factually true, but they do reveal important truths about our deepest, darkest fears. Embracing these fears by sharing them in a group is a way of confronting and coping with what we're afraid of. So, on some dark night, maybe around a campfire, or during a sleepover, or just a quiet evening with friends, try telling one of these tales of terror, if you dare. Coming in at number 20, we have Bunny Man Bridge. Have you heard of the Bunny Man Bridge? It's a secluded overpass near Clifton, Virginia. Many years ago, a deranged escapee from the local insane asylum took refuge there. That's when the half-eaten carcasses of rabbits were found, and the mysterious Bunny Man killings began. On Colchester Road in Fairfax County, Virginia, just outside the small town of Clifton, stands an unlikely tourist destination known officially as Colchester Overpass, unofficially as Bunny Man Bridge. To outward appearances, there's nothing remarkable about the site, which consists of a one-lane concrete tunnel beneath a railroad track. What draws people to it, despite the fact that tourism is discouraged by local authorities, are the tales of mayhem and murder told about the place. So that's interesting and creepy. Next, we have the breast infestation. After anthropologist Susan McKinley came back home from an expedition in South America, she noticed a very strange rash on her left breast. Nobody knew what it was, and she quickly dismissed it, believing that the holes would leave in time. They didn't. When she was finally examined by a doctor, the diagnosis was more horrible than she could ever imagine. It is horrible. Guys, tell your wives, sisters, girlfriends, and girls, cousins, wash your bras before wearing. A viral image and video purport to document the case of a female anthropologist named Susan McKinley who failed to seek treatment for a rash and wound up with an infestation of larvae in her breast. Please wash all bras, underwear when you buy before wearing them. We do not know what parasite is in our clothes when we buy them. Forward to everyone, let me forewarn you, this is so squeamish, I feel like something is crawling all over me as I send this to you. Beware. It is so grotesque. Please wash your underwear before wearing, preferably in boiling hot water. This is not for the weak. I have never seen anything like this. Read the article before looking at the picture and film. This looks horrible. Oh my God. Ladies, this could happen to you, and guys, this could happen to your wife, girlfriend, partner, so please beware and also warn others. It has been reported that this is happening in Zimbabwe as well. Please make sure you iron your undergarments before you wear them, and make sure that your clothes are ironed when they are dry and not damp. The picture is horrible, but I feel I should share with you. After anthropologist Susan McKinley came back home from an expedition in South America, she noticed a very strange rash on her left breast. Again, nobody knew what it was, and she quickly dismissed it, believing holes would leave in time. Upon her return, she decided to see a doctor. After she started developing intense pains, the doctor, not knowing the exact severity of the disease, gave her antibiotics and special creams. As time lapsed, the pain did not subside, and her left breast became more inflamed and started to bleed. She decided to bandage her sores. However, as Susan's pain grew more intense, she decided to seek help from a more certified doctor. Dr. Lynch could not diagnose the infection and told Susan to seek the aid of one of his colleagues who specialized in dermatology, whom was sadly on vacation. She waited for 2 weeks and finally was able to react the dermatologist. Sadly, a life-changing event was about to unfold during her appointment. To Miss McKinley's surprise, after she removed the bandages, they found larvae growing and squirming within the pores and sores of her breast. Sometimes these wicked creatures would all together simultaneously move around into different crevices. What she didn't know was that the holes were in fact deeper than she originally thought, for these larvae were feeding off the fat, tissue, and even milk canals of her bosom. That is gross and freaky. Number 18. The knife in the briefcase. After consenting to give a ride to a Good Samaritan who helped her fix a flat tire, a lone female driver suddenly remembers she has a very important appointment, apologizes, and races off without him. Later that day, she finds the man has left his briefcase in the back seat of her car. She opens it and receives the shock of her life. This is also known as the hatchet in the handbag or the harried arm hitchhiker. This is the first example. One summer day in Southampton, New York, a woman pulled into a gas station. As the attendant pumped gas, the woman told him she was in a hurry to pick up her daughter, who had just finished an art class in East Hampton. A very well-dressed man walked over to her car and started talking to her. He explained that his rental car had died, and he needed a ride to East Hampton for an appointment. She said she would be more than happy to give him a ride. He put his briefcase in the back seat and said he was going to the men's room quickly. The woman looked at her watch and suddenly panicked. She drove off quickly, forgetting that the man was coming back to her car for a ride. She saw nothing of him again until she and her daughter pulled into their driveway. She saw his briefcase and realized she had forgotten him. She opened it looking for some form of identification so she could notify him about his belongings. Inside, she found nothing but a knife and a roll of duct tape. Example 2. A young woman was leaving a local shopping mall only to find that she had a flat tire. A very well-dressed man carrying a briefcase came up to her and asked if she needed help. She told him she would call AAA, but when she did, she was told it would be over an hour before the truck would be dispatched to her site. The gentleman urged her to let him fix her flat, and she finally allowed him to do so. When he was finished, he asked if she would give him a ride to the other side of the mall. As his car was parked there, looking at her watch, she realized how late it was and apologized to the young man, saying that she needed to get home as it was her daughter's birthday and her husband was at home with the 2 children awaiting her arrival. The man went on his way. When she got home, she told her husband what had happened at the mall and about the man who came to her aid. The husband went out to look at the tire and saw that the man had inadvertently left his briefcase in the trunk of the vehicle. He brought it into the living room and they opened it to see if they could find the man's name and phone number. Upon opening the briefcase, they found only 5 items: a rag, chloroform, duct tape, a body bag, and an ice pick, which was probably used to cause the flat. Yikes. Number 17. The Missing Bride. After a lavish wedding in a stately mansion, members of the wedding party decided to play a game of hide and seek. It wasn't long before everyone is found. Everyone, that is, except for the bride. 24 hours later, she is still missing. What happened to the bride? Let's see if we can find out. This urban legend is also known as the Lost Bride, Bride and Go Seek, Generva, the Mistletoe Bough, the Mistletoe Bride, the Bride in the Oak Chest, the Bride in the Trunk. And here is the first example of the story. A young woman was about to get married, and she decided she wanted to hold the wedding in the backyard of the large farmhouse where she grew up. It was a beautiful wedding, and everything went perfectly. Afterward, the guests played some casual party games, and some suggested hide and seek, so they could get the children to play too. It wouldn't be hard to find a place to hide around the house. The groom was it, and the bride wanted to make sure that she won the game. When no one was looking, she slipped inside the house. She ran up to the attic, found an old trunk, and hid in it. No one could find her. Her husband wasn't worried, though. He figured she must have just gotten tired and went inside to rest. So everyone went home. The groom looked around the house, but he couldn't find her anywhere. He and her parents filed a missing persons case, but she was never found. A few years later, when her mother died, the woman's father went to go through his late wife's things that were collecting dust in the attic. He came to an old chest. The lid was closed and the old lock was rusted over and holding it closed. He opened the lid and was terrified to see his daughter's decaying body in the chest. When she hid there, the lid had closed and the rusty parts of the lock had latched together, trapping her there. The next example is the missing bride tale. Back in '75, a young couple, both 18, decided to get married right after high school. The father of the bride lived in Palm Beach in a mansion and was able to afford a big wedding for them. To make a long story short, they got married and the wedding was beautiful. After the wedding, they had a big reception in an old building and everyone got pretty drunk. When there were only about 20 people left, the groom decided that they should play hide and seek. Everyone agreed, and the groom was it. They all went and hid, and the game went on. After about 20 minutes, everyone had been found except the bride. Everyone looked everywhere and tore the whole place apart looking for her. After a few hours, the groom was furious, thinking the bride was playing a terrible trick. Eventually, everyone went home. A few weeks later, the groom, having placed a missing persons report, gave up looking for her. Heartbroken, he tried to go on with his life. 3 years later, a little old woman was cleaning up the place. She happened to be in the attic and saw an old trunk. She dusted it off and, out of curiosity, opened it. She screamed at the top of her lungs, ran out of the building, and called the police. Apparently, the bride had decided to hide in the trunk for the game of hide and seek. When she sat down, the lid fell, knocking her unconscious and locking her inside. She suffocated about a day or so. When the woman found her, she was rotting, her mouth in the shape of a scream. The third example, the missing bride tale. A bride and groom were both very young, around 16. That's young. But decided to get married anyway, as was the way in those days. It was a huge, elaborate wedding, and the reception was held at an old mansion, an heirloom of the family of sorts. After most people had left and all were drunk of wedding champagne, the bride whined she was getting bored. When asked what she'd like to do, she grinned and said she always loved a good game of hide and seek. Though reluctant to play such a childish game, all agreed, and the maid of honor was it. It only took about 30 minutes for all to be found. All but the bride, that is. Everyone began searching the entire house, but no one found her. The groom, thinking maybe she had second thoughts about the marriage, grew angry and sent everyone home. After 2 or 3 days, he put on a missing persons report, but no luck. Eventually, he moved on with his life. After the girl's father had died, the mansion was being cleaned. The family was taking what they would before the auction came around. The mother of the long-gone bride was up in the storage attic cleaning out the old clothes and junk when she saw an old trunk with a lock on it. After breaking the lock, she peered inside and began to scream. All ran upstairs to see what was happening. Inside the trunk was the bride, dead, after the lid fell on her head and crushed part of her skull. Though she was still grinning at her little game of hide and seek. Number 16. The Choking Doberman. A family comes home to find their Doberman Pinscher choking in the living room. They take the dog to an emergency veterinarian and return home, only to receive a frantic call from the vet who tells them to get out of the house and fast. Why? Well, it has to do with what the dog was choking on. Now here's an example story of the so-called choking Doberman, urban legend. My cousin and his wife lived in Sydney with this huge Doberman in a little apartment off of Marlborough Road. One night they went out for dinner and a spot of clubbing. By the time they got home, it was late, and my cousin was more than a little drunk. They got in the door, and they were greeted by the dog choking to death in the lounge room. My cousin just fainted, but his wife rang the veterinarian, who was an old family friend of hers, and got her to agree to meet her at the surgery. The wife drives over and drops the dog off the dog, but decides that she better go home and get her hubby into bed. She gets home and finally slaps my cousin into consciousness, but he's still drunk. It takes her almost half an hour to get him up the stairs. And then the phone rings. She's tempted just to leave it, but she decides that it must be important or they wouldn't be ringing that late at night. As soon as she picks up the phone, she hears the vet's voice screaming out. "Thank God I got to you in time. Leave the house now." No time to explain. Then the vet hangs up. Because she's such an old family friend, the wife trusts her, and so she starts getting the hubby down the stairs and out of the house. By the time they made it all the way out, the police are outside. They rush up the front stairs, past the couple into the house. But my cousin's wife still doesn't have a clue what's going on. The vet shows up and says, "Have they got him? Have they got him?" "Have they got who?" says the wife, starting to get really pissed off. "Well, I found out what the dog was choking on. It was a human finger." Just then the police drag out a dirty, stubbly man who was bleeding profusely from one hand. "Hey, Sarge," one of them yells, "we found him in the bedroom." Wow. Always trust the vet or an old family friend. Number 15. The fatal hairdo. A stylish high school girl who has grown tired of spending hours a day teasing and lacquering her hair to attain the beehive hairdo, so popular in the 1960s, decides instead to wash it in sugar water and let it harden into the preferred style. Before going to bed each night, she wrapped a towel around her sugared hair and slept on a special pillow. Then one morning she felt it come downstairs before breakfast. A vile rumor has been circulating for years about the very stylish teenage girl who grew tired of spending hours carefully teasing, and spraying her hair to attain the extreme beehive hairdo. She washed her hair in sugar water, allowing it to harden in the style she wanted. At night, she carefully wrapped a towel around it and slept on a special half pillow designed not to disturb her hair. One morning, she failed to come down for breakfast. Her mother went to her room only to find her dead in bed. When the towel was removed from her head, it was discovered she had been gnawed to death by rats. Wow, I am definitely not doing that to my hair. No, no, no. Number 14. The body under the bed. Honeymooners notice a strange odor in their hotel suite and call the front desk to see if they can switch rooms. No, they're told the hotel is full and they have to sleep at least one night in the smelly room. When housekeepers arrive the next day to clean the room, they make a grisly discovery that they would never forget. Here's an example of the scary urban legend known as the body under the bed. A man and woman went to Las Vegas for their honeymoon and checked into a suite at a hotel. When they got to their room, they both detected a very bad odor. The husband called down to the front desk and asked to speak to the manager. He explained that the room smelled very bad and would like another suite. The manager apologized and told the man that they were all booked because of a convention. He offered to send them to a restaurant of their choice for lunch compliments of the hotel. and said he was going to send a maid up to the room to clean and try to get rid of the odor. After a nice lunch, the couple went back to the room. When they walked in, they both could still smell the same odor. Again, the husband called the front desk and told the manager that the room still smelled really bad. The manager told the man that they would try to find a suite at another hotel. He called every hotel on the strip, but every hotel was sold out because of the convention. The manager told the couple that they couldn't find them a room anywhere, but they would try and clean the room again. The couple wanted to see the sights and do a little gambling anyway, so they said they would give them 2 hours to clean and then would be back. When the couple had left, the manager and all the housekeeping went to the room to try to find what was making the room smell so bad. They searched the entire room and found nothing, so the maids changed the sheets, changed the towels, took down the curtains, and put new ones up. They cleaned the carpet and cleaned the suite again, using the strongest cleaning products they had. The couple came back 2 hours later to find the room still had a very bad odor. The husband was so angry at this point, he decided to find whatever the smell was himself. He started tearing the entire suite apart. As he pulled the top mattress off the box spring, he found a dead body of a woman. Well, all it takes is one dead body under the mattress to spoil your whole honeymoon. Coming up next, we have, which is number 13, ants in the brain. A child who fell asleep while eating sweets in his bed began to complain of a severe headaches and facial itching, so was taken to the hospital. Upon examining him and taking x-rays of his skull, doctors discovered that ants had crawled through his ear canal into his head and infested his brain. In this viral tale, doctors investigate the cause of severe headaches and facial itching in a young child, discovering that ants have crawled in his ear and infested his brain. Their considered opinion: never, ever eat sweets before going to bed. Could this have really happened? We will investigate. This has been circulating since 2001. So let's see. Subject: beware of ants. Case 1. A little boy died because surgeons found ants in his brain. Apparently, this boy had fallen asleep with some sweets in his mouth, or with some sweet stuff beside him. Ants soon got to him, and some ants had in fact crawled into his ear, which somehow managed to go to his brain. When he woke up, he did not realize that ants had gone to his head. After that, he constantly complains about itchiness around his face. His mother brought him to see a doctor, but the doctor could not figure out what was wrong with him. He took an x-ray of the boy, and to his horror, he found a group of live ants in his skull. Since the ants are still alive, the doctor could not operate on him because the ants are constantly moving about. The boy at last died. So please, be careful when leaving food stuff beside your bed or when eating in bed. This might attract ants. Most importantly, never eat a sweet before going to bed. You might fall asleep and suffer the same fate as the little boy. Case 2. Another similar incident happened in the hospital in Taiwan. This man was warded in the hospital and was constantly warned by the nurses not to leave foodstuff by his bedside, for there are ants about. He did not heed their advice. Ants finally got to him. His family members said that the man constantly complained about headaches. He died, and a post-mortem or autopsy was done on him. Doctors found a group of live ants in his head. Apparently, the ants had been eating bits of his brain. So, dear friends, better be safe than sorry. Never leave foodstuff by your side when you go to sleep. I know I definitely won't. Number 12. The premature burial. A long time ago, before adequate technology for detecting patients' critical life signs existed, an elderly woman was pronounced dead and scheduled for burial. On the day of the funeral, the family members literally had to pry her dead body from the clutches of her husband, who insisted she wasn't really dead. So let's see what's on this one here. If I can read this. Let me get my glasses. Okay, there we go. In the past few years, viral rumors have been circulating on the internet via emails and social media posts claiming that some people have been buried alive. As horrifying as this urban legend may sound, it, unfortunately, has a grain of truth. Let's read on to find out how throughout history people sometimes were buried, even though they were not dead. The following is a sample email that was sent as recently as mid-2016. My great-grandmother, ill for quite some time, finally passed away after lying in a coma for several days. My great-great-grandfather was devastated beyond belief. Oh, sorry, it was the great-great-grandmother. The grandfather was devastated beyond belief, as she was his one and only true love, and they had been married over 50 years. They were married so long it seemed as if they knew each other's innermost thoughts. After the doctors pronounced her dead, my great-great-grandfather insisted she was not deceased. They had to literally pry him away from his wife's body so they could ready her for burial. Now, back in those days, they had backyard burial plots and did not drain the body of its fluids. They simply prepared a proper coffin and committed the body in its coffin to its permanent resting place. Throughout this process, my great-great-grandfather protested so fiercely that he had to be sedated and put to bed. His wife was buried, and that was that. That night, he woke to a horrific vision of his wife hysterically trying to scratch her way out of the coffin. He phoned the doctor immediately and begged to have his wife's body exhumed. The doctor refused, but my great-great-grandfather had this nightmare every night for a week, each time frantically begging to have his wife removed from the grave. Finally, the doctor gave in, and together with local authorities, they exhumed the body. The coffin was pried open to everyone's horror and amazement. My great-great-grandmother's nails were bent back, and there were obvious signs of the scratches inside the coffin. Now, shades of Edgar Allan Poe, it's a fact that once upon a time, before modern embalming techniques were in widespread use, people were found on rare occasions to have been buried alive, a circumstance that could not have been pleasant for anyone concerned. Least of all, the poor souls who woke up 6 feet under. Here's one grisly example of a real-life case of premature burial as reported in the New York Times on January 18th. 1886. Buried alive. Woodstock, Ontario, January 18th. Recently, a girl named Collins died here, as it was supposed very suddenly. A day or two ago, the body was exhumed prior to its removal to another burial place when the discovery was made that the girl had been buried alive. Her shroud was torn to shreds, her knees were drawn up to her chin, one of her arms was twisted under her head, and her features bored. Evidence of dreadful torture. It didn't help that medical science was slow to produce a reliable checklist of vital signs, nor that many doctors prior to the late 19th century were too poorly educated or incompetent, or both, to tell a living body from a dead one. Moral panic. It is also a fact that something of a moral panic concerning premature burials took hold in parts of Europe and North America during the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries, the fever of which was scarcely warranted by the facts. Historians surmise that the uproar may have been prompted by the medical discovery that victims of suffocation and drowning could be resuscitated. That, though they appeared dead, they really weren't. This must have been disconcerting realization for many people at the time. So strong was the fear of precipitated interment during the 19th century that some folks who had the means to do so stipulated that in their wills that their coffins be outfitted with signaling devices just in case. No one knows if any of these devices were ever actually used to send signals from the grave. That is freaky, but at least nowadays, if you're not dead, by the time you get to the coroner's office, you will be afterwards. Coming in at number 11, Killer in the Window. A 15-year-old girl was babysitting her little sister while her parents were out at a party. It was a cold, dark, wintry night. She had just curled up on the couch to watch TV when she noticed a tall figure approaching the sliding glass door near where she was sitting. It was a wrinkled old man. He was staring at her. Then he pulled out a shiny, metallic object out of his pocket. Freaky. This is also known as the face in the window or the killer's reflection. Example 1. This girl was at home all alone watching TV on a cold winter night. The television was right beside a sliding glass door and the blinds were open. Suddenly she saw a wrinkled old man staring at her through the glass. She screamed, then grabbed the phone next to the couch and pulled a blanket over her head so the guy couldn't see her while she called the police. She was so terrified she remained under the blanket until the police got there. It had snowed a lot during the day, so the police naturally decided to look for footprints. But there were no footprints at all in the snow, the ground outside the sliding door. Puzzled, the police went back inside the house, and that's when they saw the wet footprints on the floor leading to the couch where the girl was sitting. The policemen looked at each other nervously. "Miss, you're extremely lucky," one of them finally said to her. "Why?" "Because," he said, "the man wasn't outside at all. He was in here, standing right behind the couch. What you saw in the window was his reflection." Example 2. A 15-year-old girl was babysitting her sister while her parents went out to party. She sent her sister off to bed around 9:30 while she stayed up to watch her favorite TV show. She sat in the recliner with a blanket and watched until it went off around 10:30. After it went off, she turned around in her seat and to face the big glass door to watch the snow fall. She sat there about 5 minutes or so when she noticed a strange man walking towards the glass from outside. She sat there staring as he stared back at her. He started to pull out a shiny object from his coat. Thinking it was a knife, she immediately pulled the covers over her head. About 10 minutes she removed the covers and saw he was gone. She then called 911 and they rushed over. They examined the outside for any footprints in the snow, but there were none to be found. The two cops walked into her house and told her the bad news, and they noticed a trail of big wet footprints leading up to the chair where she was sitting. The cops came to their conclusion and immediately told the girl she was very lucky because the man she saw staring at her was not standing outside, but he was standing behind her, and what she saw was his reflection. This chilling variation on the familiar trope of the threatened babysitter makes effective use of the shocking reveal. Our protagonist learns after the fact that the prowler hadn't been watching her from the outside of the house as she assumed, but was inside the house the whole time, making her close call with the boogeyman all the closer and all the more horrifying in retrospect. Coming in at number 10, we have Humans Can Lick Too. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful girl in a small town just south of Farmersburg. Her parents had to go out for the night, so they left her home alone. Protected by the faithful family dog, they instructed her to lock all the doors and secure the house after they left. She did as she was told, nervous about being left alone, but was confident that her faithful dog would protect her. Now there is an urban legend that goes something like this. Once there was a nice old lady who had a lovely little dog. One day, the old lady heard on the radio that a crazy murderer had escaped from jail, and she should lock all her doors and windows. So she locked every door and window in the house, except one tiny one to let some air in. She thought that a murderer would never be able to get in through the one small window. So that night she went to bed as usual. She knew everything was okay because when she put down her hand, the dog, he would lick it. But later in the night she heard a drip, drip, drip. She put her hand down and the dog licked it. Figuring everything was okay, she went downstairs to check out the tap, but it wasn't the tap wasn't dropping or dripping. So she went to bed again, and everything was okay. She woke up again later in the night, though she thought the dripping sound must be coming from the shower. She went to the bathroom, and there was her dog, dead, hanging in the shower, dripping with blood, all its intestines hanging out. Written on the mirror were the words, "Humans can lick too." And behind her in the mirror, she saw the murderer. Example number 2. Years ago, versions of the following internet chain letter began circulating. Once there was a beautiful young girl who lived in a small town called Farmersburg. Her parents had to go to town for a while, so they left their daughter home alone. But she was protected by her dog, a very large collie. The girl's parents told her to lock all the windows and doors after they had left, and about 8 p.m. her parents went to town. Doing what she was told, the girl shut and locked every window and every door. But there was one window in the basement that would not close completely. Trying her best, the girl finally got the window to shut, but it would not lock. So the girl, she let the window shut but unlocked and headed back upstairs. Just to make sure that no one could get in, she put a deadbolt lock on the basement door. She sat down, had some dinner, and decided to go to sleep for the night. Settling down to sleep at about midnight, the girl snuggled up with the dog and fell asleep, woken up by a dripping sound. But at one point in the night, she suddenly woke up, and she turned and looked at the clock. It was 2:30 a.m. She snuggled down again, wondering what awoke her. She heard a noise. It was a dripping sound. She thought that she had left the water running, and now it was dripping into the drain of her sink. Thinking it was no big deal, she decided to go back to sleep, but she felt nervous, so she reached her hand over the edge of her bed and let the dog lick her hand for reassurance that he would protect her. Again, about 3:45 a.m., she woke up hearing a dripping sound, and she was slightly angry now, but went back to sleep anyway. Again, she reached down and let the dog lick her hand. Then she fell back asleep. At 6:52 a.m., the girl decided that she had had enough. She got up just in time to see her parents were pulling up to the house. Good, she thought. Now somebody can fix the sink because I know I didn't leave it running. She walked into the bathroom, and there was the collie dog, skinned and hung up on the curtain rod. The noise she heard was his blood dripping into a puddle on the floor. The girl screamed and ran to her bedroom to get a weapon, in case someone was still there in the house. And there on the floor, next to her bed, she saw a small note written in blood saying, "Humans can lick too, my beautiful." Makes me think twice. Number 9. The babysitter and the man upstairs. In this classic urban legend, dating from the 1960s, a young babysitter calls the police after receiving prank phone calls from a creepy stranger who keeps asking if she's checked the children. While waiting for a patrol car to arrive, the babysitter receives more calls and has a terrifying realization. Let's see what happens. Now, the babysitter and the man upstairs is, teenagers have been sharing since the 1960s. A married couple were going out for the evening and called a teenage babysitter to take care of their 3 children. When she arrived, they told her they probably wouldn't be back until late, and the kids were already asleep, so she needn't disturb them. The babysitter starts doing her homework while awaiting a call from her boyfriend. After a while, the phone rings. She answers it, but hears no one on the other end. Just silence. Then whoever it is hangs up. After a few more minutes, the phone rings again. She answers, and this time there's a man on the line who says in a chilling voice, "Have you checked the children?" Click. At first, she thinks it might have been the father calling to check up, and he got interrupted, so she decides to ignore it. She goes back to her homework, and then the phone rings again. "Have you checked on the children?" says the creepy voice on the other end. "Mr. Murphy?" she asks, but the caller just hangs up again. She decides to phone the restaurant where the parents said they'd be dining, but when she asks for Mr. Murphy, she is told that he and his wife had left the restaurant 45 minutes earlier. So she calls the police and reports that a stranger has been calling her and hangs up. "Has he threatened you?" the dispatcher asks. "No," she says. "Well, there's nothing we can really do about it. You could try reporting the prank caller to the phone company." A few minutes go by when she gets another call. "Why haven't you checked the children?" the voice says. "Who is this?" she asks, but he hangs up again. She dials 911 again and says, "I'm scared. I know he's out there. He's watching me." "Have you seen him?" the dispatcher asks. She says no. "Well, there isn't much we can do about it," the dispatcher says. The babysitter goes into panic mode and pleads with him to help her. Now, it'll be okay," he says. "Give me your number and street address. If you can keep this guy on the phone for at least a minute, we'll try to trace the call. What's your name again?" "Linda." "Okay, Linda, if he calls back, we'll do our best to trace the call, but just keep calm. Can you do that for me?" "Yes," she says. She hangs up. She decides to turn the lights down so she can see if anyone's outside, and that's when she gets another call. "It's me," says the familiar voice. "Why did you turn the lights down?" "Can you see me?" she asks, panicking. "Yes," he says after a long pause. "Look, you scared me," she says. "I'm shaking. Are you happy? Is that what you wanted?" "No." "Then what do you want?" she asks. Another long pause. "Your blood all over me." She slams the phone down, terrified. Almost immediately, it rings again. "Leave me alone," she screams, but it's the dispatcher calling back, his voice urgent. "Linda, we've traced that call. It's coming from another room inside the house. Get out of there, now." She tears to the front door, attempting to unlock it and dash outside, only to find the chain at the top is still lashed. In time, it takes her to unhook it. She sees a door open at the top of the stairs, light streaming from the children's bedroom, revealing the profile of the man standing just inside. She finally gets the door open and bursts outside, only to find a cop standing on the doorstep with his gun drawn. At this point, she's safe, of course. But when they capture the intruder and drag him downstairs in handcuffs, she sees he's covered in blood. Come to find out, all 3 children have been murdered. Number 8, The Hook. A teenage boy drives his date to a dark and deserted lover's lane for a makeout session. He turns the radio on for mood music and leans for a kiss. Suddenly, the music stops. An announcer's voice comes on, warning that a convicted murderer had just escaped from a nearby insane asylum. It is also known as the Hook Man. A teenage boy drove his date to a dark and deserted lover's lane for a makeout session. Again, he turned the radio for mood music, leaned over to whisper in the girl's ear, and began kissing her. Minutes later, the mood was broken when suddenly the music stopped mid-song. After a moment of silence, the announcer's voice came on, warning in an ominous tone that a convicted murderer had just escaped from the state insane asylum, which happened to be located within a half-mile of where they were parked, and urging that anyone who notices a man wearing a stainless steel hook in place of his missing right hand should immediately report his whereabouts to the police. The girl became frightened and asked to be taken home. The boy, feeling bold, locked all the doors instead and assured his date they would be safe. Attempted to kiss her again. She became frantic and pushed him away, insisting they leave. Relenting, the boy peevishly jerked the car into gear and spun its wheels as he pulled out of the parking space. When they arrived at the girl's house, they got out of the car and, reaching to close the door, began to scream uncontrollably. The boy ran to her side to see what was wrong there. Dangling from the door handle was a bloody hook. Folks have been telling the Hookman story since 1950s, and indeed, the implicit moral message, sex is naughty, bad boys and girls will be punished, seems to be more appropriate than to that similar, more naive error. Just as this message has come to be parodied in recent horror films, whereas once upon a time it was delivered with morbid solemnity, its bygone relevance has taken the teeth out of the cautionary tale. Number 7. The Spider Bite. While vacationing in a tropical clime, a young woman went sunbathing on the beach and fell asleep. She woke up a short while later and noticed a stinging sensation on her cheek. At first she attributed it to the irritation patch of skin to sunburn. Then it began to swell and grew to an unsightly boil, except it wasn't a boil. This urban legend from the 1960s reads like a nightmare come true for arachnophobics, people afflicted with an irrational fears of spiders. But unfortunately for them, it simply isn't true. Spiders, need I say, writes University of Washington arachnid expert Rod Crawford, do not find the human body a suitable site for egg laying. And no actual case anything like this can be found anywhere in the scientific or medical literature. Bodily insects. Infestations are a recurring theme in folklore. However, have you heard the one about the child who fell asleep while eating cookies in bed and woke up with an ant colony in his brain? I believe we covered that. Or the young lady so enamored with her own beehive hairdo in the 1960s that she refused to wash it and died of a spider infestation? And here we are. The spider bite story. This woman went vacationing in some overseas country. While lying on the beach, she fell asleep and a spider bit her. Unknown by her. She woke up with the side of her face a little sore, but attributed it to the fact that she had been tanning and maybe got slightly sunburned. Anyway, she finished her vacation, returned home, and her face began to swell, eventually forming a boil which really itched. Upon visiting her doctor, he broke open the huge boil and hundreds of tiny spiders fell out. The woman was so horrified that she went into shock and died of a heart attack right there. Wow, I think I would too. Coming in at number 6, the all too popular Bloody Mary. 5 young girls stood before the bathroom mirror in dim candlelight, chanting together, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." The 13th time they said it, something very odd and very frightening happened. Not all of the girls lived through it, and some of those who had died, and some who did, which wish they hadn't. Let's see. Now, the legend of Bloody Mary and the terrible fate she inflicts on those foolish enough to summon her has been around in one form or another for hundreds of years. Sometimes the evil spirit is known as Mary Worth, Hail Mary, Mary White, or Mary Jane. Her tale emerged from the British folklore in 1700s and took on a new life with the advent of the internet. But is there any truth to the story? So here's Mary's story. Channelers have been circulating online since the 1990s when email first became popular. In some versions of the story, the ghost of Mary kills anyone who summons her, or in other versions, she merely scares the wits out of them. This version is one of the first to appear online in 1994. When I was about 9 years old, I went to a friend's for a birthday slumber party, where there were about 10 other girls there. About midnight, we decided to play Mary Worth. Some of us had never heard of this, so one of the girls told the story. Mary Worth lived a long time ago. She was a very beautiful young girl. One day she had a terrible accident that left her face so disfigured that nobody would look at her. She had not been allowed to see her own reflection after this accident, for fear that she would lose her mind. Before this, she had spent long hours admiring her beauty in her bedroom mirror. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, unable to fight the curiosity any longer, she crept into a room that had a mirror. As soon as she saw her face, she broke down into terrible screams and sobs. It was at this moment that she was so heartbroken and wanted her old reflection back that she walked into the mirror to find it, vowing to disfigure anybody that came looking for her in the mirror. After hearing the story, which was told very scarily, we decided to turn out all the lights and try it. We all huddled around the mirror and started repeating, "Mary Worth, Mary Worth, I believe in Mary Worth." About the 7th time we said it, one of the girls that was in front of the mirror started screaming and trying to push her way back, away from the mirror. She was screaming so loud that my friend's mom came running to the room. She quickly turned on the lights and found the girls huddled in the corner screaming. She turned around to see if it was a problem. And she saw these long fingernail scratches running down her right cheek. I will never forget her face as long as I live. The best anyone can tell, the legend of Bloody Mary and its comparably gory variants emerged in the early 1960s as an adolescent party game. In most versions, there's no connection drawn between the Bloody Mary, whose ghost haunts bathroom mirrors, and the British Queen of the same name. Likewise, there is no apparent connection between Mary Worth of the legend and the Mary Worth comic strip fame. So, what is there to believe? Would you dare to try it? Coming in at number 5, the Russian sleep experiment. Not long after the end of World War II, Russian researchers conducted an experiment in which 5 prison inmates were confined in a sealed chamber and exposed to a powerful stimulant gas to test the effects of long-term sleep deprivation on human subjects. The inmates had been promised their freedom if they could stay awake for 30 days straight. What could possibly go wrong? Here's a synopsis. So, towards the end of the 1940s, Soviet researchers sealed 5 prison inmates in an airtight chamber and doused them with an experimental stimulant gas to test the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation. Their behavior was observed via 2-way mirrors, and their conversations monitored electronically. They were promised their freedom if they could go without sleep for 30 days. The first few days passed uneventfully. By the 5th day, however, the subjects began showing signs of stress and were overheard bemoaning their circumstances. They stopped conversing with their fellow inmates, choosing instead to whisper compromising information about one another to the microphones. Apparently, in an effort to win favor of the researchers, paranoia set in. On the 9th day, the screaming began. First one subject, then another, who was observed running around the chamber screaming for hours on end. Equally disconcerting was the behavior of the quieter subject, who began ripping apart the books they had been given to read, smearing the pages with feces, and plastering them all over the mirrored windows so their actions could no longer be observed. Just as suddenly, the screaming stopped. The subjects ceased communicating altogether. 3 days passed without a sound from inside the chamber. Fearing the worst, the researchers addressed them via intercom. "We're opening the chamber to test the microphones," they said. "Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you'll be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." A voice from inside answered, "We no longer want to be freed." 2 more days passed without contact of any kind as the scientists debated what to do next. Finally, they decided to terminate the experiment. At midnight on the 15th day, the stimulant gas was flushed from the chamber and replaced with fresh air in preparation for the subject's release. Far from being pleased at the prospect of leaving, the subjects began screaming, as if in fear for their lives. They begged to have the gas turned back on. Instead, the researchers unsealed the door to the chamber and sent armed soldiers inside to retrieve them. Nothing could have prepared them for what the carnage they witnessed upon entering. One subject was found dead, lying face down 6 inches from bloody water. Chunks of his flesh had been torn off and stuffed into the floor drain. All of the subjects had been severely mutilated. In fact, even worse, the wounds appeared to be self-inflicted. They had ripped open their own abdomens and disemboweled themselves with their bare hands. Some had even eaten their own flesh. The 4 who were still alive seemed terrified of falling asleep and refused to leave the chamber, again pleading with the researchers to turn the gas back on. When the soldiers attempted to remove the inmates by force, they fought back so ferociously they couldn't believe their eyes. One suffered a ruptured spleen and lost so much blood there was literally nothing left for his heart to pump, yet continued flailing for a full 3 minutes until his lifeless body collapsed. The remaining subjects were restrained and transported to a medical facility for treatment. The first to be operated on fought so ferociously against being anesthetized that he tore muscles and broke bones during the struggle. As soon as the anesthetic took effect, his heart stopped and he died. The rest underwent surgery without sedation. Far from feeling any pain, however, they laughed hysterically on the operating table, so hysterically that the doctors, perhaps fearing for their own sanity, administered a paralytic agent to mobilize them. After surgery, the survivors were asked why they had mutilated themselves and why they so desperately wanted to go back on the stimulant gas. Each, in turn, gave the same enigmatic answer: "I must remain awake." The researchers considered euthanizing them to obliterate every trace of the failed experiment, but was overruled by their commanding officer, who ordered that it be resumed immediately, with 3 of the researchers joining the inmates in the sealed chamber. Horrified, the chief researcher pulled out a pistol and shot the commanding officer point blank. He then returned a shot and shot one of the 2 surviving subjects. Aiming his gun at the last one left alive, he asked, "What are you? I must know." "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject said, grinning. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralyze when you go out, when you go to the nocturnal heaven where we cannot tread." The researcher fired a bullet into his heart. The EEG monitor flatlined as the subject murmured these last words: "So nearly free." It is a given that human beings require a certain amount of sleep on a regular basis in order for our minds and bodies to function properly. Anyone who has experienced a night or 2 or 3 of insomnia knows how critical even a few hours of refreshing sleep can be one health and well-being. Number 4. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. As darkness fell, the honeymooners came upon a female hitchhiker in a tattered white dress. She begged them to take her home. They obliged, and a strange thing happened. As they pulled into the driveway of the address she had given them, it was a moment they'd never forget. This is also known as the Ghost Hitchhiker, the Phantom Hitchhiker, and the Lady in White. The newlywed couple, Nathan and Heather, were driving up the Northern California coast to spend their dream honeymoon in a quaint bed and breakfast with a seaside view. They had hoped to arrive before dark, but a heavy fog had descended on the Highway 1, and their progress was slow. They were at least an hour and a half from their destination as night fell. If you've ever driven that stretch of highway, you know how torturous it can be with its narrow lanes and switchback curves. It was just as they were rounding one of those curves that they passed a solitary hitchhiker. A young woman in a whispery white dress standing on the shoulder with a thumb outstretched. "Good luck getting a ride on this night like this," muttered Nathan under his breath. "Stop the car and turn around," Heather said. "Please. She's all alone. We have to give her a ride. We're 2 hours late. Please." Nathan pulled off the road and turned around. As they approached the girl from the opposite direction, they could see her dress was in tatters, her face pale and gaunt. "Can we give you a ride?" Heather asked as they pulled up beside her. "Oh, thank you," said the young woman, who appeared to be in her late teens or early 20s. "I have to get home. My parents will be worried sick." "Where do they live?" asked Nathan. "Just down the road, about 10 miles, she said, climbing into the back seat. "There's an intersection with an abandoned gas station across from there. It is a white house with a rose garden. They're waiting for me." As they made their way north again, Heather attempted to make conversation, but the girl fell silent and slumped in the back seat, apparently asleep. After about 15 minutes, Nathan spotted the dilapidated service station. "Is this it? Hey, is this the intersection?" Heather turned to wake the young woman and caught her breath. "Nathan, she's gone." "What do you mean she's gone?" Nathan said, pulling to the driveway of the White House. "How can she be gone?" She was right. The hitchhiker had vanished. A light came on, and 2 people, an elderly couple, stepped out into the porch. "Can we help you?" the man asked. He looked as though he dreaded hearing the answer. I don't know. We were driving, we picked up this hitchhiker, a girl." "And she gave you this address," said the man, "and asked you to bring her home?" "Yes," said Heather. "And then she was gone." Heather nodded. "You aren't crazy," the man said. "And you're not the first. She was our daughter. Her name was Diane. She passed away 7 years ago, killed by a hit-and-run driver on the highway. They never caught whoever did it. I guess her spirit won't rest until they do." Nathan and Heather were speechless. "Won't you come inside for coffee or tea?" said the woman. "You've had a shock. Come in and sit down." "No, thank you, but no. We're late. We have to get going. After exaggerating uncomfortable goodbyes, or exchanging goodbyes, the newlyweds departed as they arrived in stunned silence. Number 3. Aren't you glad you didn't turn the light on? As if we need proof that scary things happen in the dark, this unnerving tale about a murderous madman lurking unseen in a dark dormitory bedroom proves that sometimes what you don't know can hurt you, even if it chooses for the moment to hide and wait. Tales are known as Aren't You Glad You Didn't Turn the Light On, or The Roommate's Death, might be told around the campfire or at sleepovers. Often it is told in urban legend style, as if it happened to a friend or a friend at a nearby university. You might be worried that it is a recent incident and a serial killer might be stalking the campus. You can allay your fears by matching the story you just heard with long circulating urban legends. Here are 2 examples with analysis. 2 dorm mates in college were in the same science class. The teacher had just reminded them about the midterm the next day when one of the dorm mates, let's call her Julie, got asked to this big bash by the hottest guy in school. The other dorm mate, Meg, had pretty much no interest in going, and being a diligent student, she took notes on what the midterm was about. After the entire period of flirting with her date, Julie was totally unprepared for her test, while Meg was completely prepared for a major study date with her books. At the end of the day, Julie spent hours getting ready for the party while Meg started studying. Julie tried to get Meg to go, but she was insistent that she would just study and pass the test. The girls were rather close, and Julie didn't like leaving Meg alone to be bored while she was out having a blast. Julie finally gave up, using the excuse that she would cram her honeymoon in her homeroom. Why is it honeymoon? In homeroom the next day. Julie went to the party and had the time of her life with her date. She headed back to the dorm around 2 a.m. and decided not to wake Meg. She went to her bed nervous about the midterm and decided she would wake up early and ask Meg for help. She woke up and went to wake Meg. Meg was lying on her stomach, apparently sound asleep. Julie rolled Meg over to reveal Meg's terrified face. Julie, concerned, turned on the desk lamp. Meg's study stuff was still open and had blood all over it. Meg had been slaughtered. Julie, in horror, fell to the floor and looked up to see, written on the wall, in Meg's blood, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" Here's the other one. I heard about a girl who went back to her dorm room late one night to get her books before heading to her boyfriend's room for the night. She entered but did not turn on the light, knowing that her roommate was sleeping. She stumbled around in the room in the dark for several minutes, gathering books, clothes, toothbrush, etc., before finally leaving. The next day she came back to her room to find it surrounded by police. They asked if she lived there, and she said yes. They took her into the room, and there, written in blood on the wall, were the words, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" Her roommate had been murdered while she was getting her things, was being murdered while she was getting her things. This is a variant of popular urban legend given the title The Roommate's Death by folklorist Jan Harold Brunvand, and in his book The Vanishing Hitchhiker, published by W.W. Norton in 1981. In every version of The Roommate's Death, someone is murdered right under the nose of an unsuspecting female protagonist. But because the lights are out, or the crime takes place in another room, the victim's body isn't discovered until later, usually the next morning. As the story is sometimes told, the protagonist hears suspicious noises while the crime is being committed, but is afraid to investigate because she thinks it could be an intruder coming after her. Coming in at number 2, The dead boyfriend. A teenage couple is parked late at night on Lover's Lane. The boy gets out of the car and heads for the bushes to go to the bathroom, but doesn't return after waiting for what seems like an eternity. His girlfriend finally hears what she thinks are his footsteps approaching. Only it's not footsteps, it's something scraping back and forth across the roof of the vehicle. Ooh, this should be good. Here are two examples of the urban legend known as the dead boyfriend. Example 1. A girl and her boyfriend are making out in his car. They had parked in the woods so no one would see them. When they were done, the boy got out to pee, and the girl waited for him in the safety of the car. After waiting 5 minutes, the girl got out of the car to look for her boyfriend. Suddenly she sees a man in the shadow. Scared, she gets back in the car to drive away when she hears a very faint squeak, squeak, squeak. This continued for a few seconds until the girl decided she had no choice but to drive off. She hit the gas as hard as possible but couldn't go anywhere because someone had tied a rope from the bumper of the car to a nearby tree. Well, the girl slams on the gas again and then hears a loud scream. She gets out of the car and realizes that her boyfriend is hanging from the tree. The squeaky noise were his shoes slightly scraping across the top of the car. Example 2. Here's a story my mom told me to me and my friends when I was about 7 years old. You can imagine I was scared to death. A woman and her boyfriend were on their way home from somewhere not important one night, and suddenly his car ran out of gas. It was about 1 in the morning, and they were completely alone in the middle of nowhere. The guy stepped out of the car, saying comfortingly to his girlfriend, "Don't worry, I'll be right back. I'm just going to go out for some help." Lock the doors, though. She locked the doors and sat restlessly, waiting for her boyfriend to come back. Suddenly she sees a shadow fall across her lap. She looks to see not her boyfriend, but a strange, crazed-looking man. He is swinging something in his right hand. He sticks his face close to the window and slowly pulls up his right hand. In it is her boyfriend's decapitated head, twisting horribly in pain and shock. She shuts her eyes in horror and tries to make the image go away. When she opens her eyes, the man is still there, grinning psychotically. He slowly lifts his left hand and he is holding her boyfriend's key to the car. And coming in at number 1, the clown statue. An adolescent babysitter caring for 2 small children phoned their parents late in the evening to ask for permission to cover up this life-size clown statue in the corner of the family room. "It's not that I don't like it," she said, "it just kind of freaks me out. I can't watch TV with that thing in the room." The reactions freak her out even more. So this is kind of similar to the angel statue to me. Clowns, some people love them, others are scared silly by them. The urban legend of the clown statue falls in the category that has been making some rounds for the internet for the last decade. And even though this tale never been proven real, the story of killer clowns are based in fact. There are a number of variations on this urban myth. This chain letter version first circulated online around 2006. Subject: clown. This is creepy or what? A few years ago, a mother and a father decided to take a needed break, so they wanted to head out for a night in the town. So they called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the 2 children were already fast asleep in bed. So the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later in the night, the babysitter got bored and so she wanted to watch TV, but she couldn't watch it downstairs because they didn't have cable downstairs. The parents didn't want their children watching too much garbage, so she called them and asked them if she would be able to watch the cable TV in the parents' room. Of course, the parents said it was okay, but the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the large clown statue in their bedroom, with a blanket or a cloth, because it made her nervous. The phone line went silent for a moment, and the father, who was talking to the babysitter at the time, said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We'll call the police. We don't have a clown statue. The children and the babysitter got murdered by the clown." It turned out to be that the clown was a killer that escaped from jail. If you don't repost to 10 peeps within 5 minutes, the clown will be standing next to your bed at 3 a.m. with a knife in his hand. In another version of the story, the clown is actually a midget who has escaped from a local jail. He hides in the house to avoid capture and poses like a statue to avoid detection. In other versions, the intruder is a murderous sex offender with designs on the babysitter. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this. I know I did. And hope you'll be able to sleep tonight. Love you guys. Y'all have a good one. Smooches and hugs. Leave a like and comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Mwah.